Welcome to Day 6 of the Samyukta Research Foundation's week-long program, In Translation, the Samyukta Story. We shall begin with Kukku Xavier's introduction and release of the covers of two translations by Samyukta, To the Workplace by Anjana Shankar and Parangodi Parinayam by Kirkepat Ramankuti Menon, both of which shall be published this month by Samyukta India Press, the latest offshoot of the foundation. Kukku Xavier is a faculty member of the Department of English at All Saints College, Trivandrum, and was a guest editor for the peer-reviewed journal Samyukta, a journal of gender and culture, special issue on life writing. She specializes in the study of sub-nations, post-colonial studies, film studies, and culture studies. Her research examines the intersection of these fields, especially with regards to contemporary Indian fiction in English. Following the cover releases, we hear from Anjana Shankar on her translation of To the Workplace. Dr. Anjana Shankar is the head of the Research and Postgraduate Department of English, Sri Shankara College, Kaladi, which is affiliated to MG University. She is a research guide, chairperson UG English Board of Studies, and also the academic council member of MG University. Her other works include a Malayalam translation of a Brechtian play and English translations of short stories from Malayalam. We hope you enjoy today's program as much as we did putting it together.
Hello, I am Kukku Xavier and welcome to the session that is a part of the ongoing week-long celebration of World Translation Day. While the world celebrated translations for a day, we here at Samyukta felt that there was so much to say, to convey, in effect, to translate that we needed a week. So here we are at a pivotal moment in world history and in our own history, and we are speaking in many languages and at many levels at once. This evening, we have for you an insight into two defining works of Malayalam literature that had been translated for the Samyukta Journal in the first decade of the century. Parangodi Parinayam by Kirkepat Ramankuti Menon and Thodil Rangathekku or the To the Workplace by Anjana Shankar. Let's start with the unique place that Parangodi Parinayam occupies in our world, written as a rather peeved response to the prevalent airs and graces of the naive society of the time, and the extended ponderings over the texture of modernity. Parangodi Parinayam was a tongue-in-cheek, mock epic to the sweeping saga that captured the Malayali literary imagination of the time, Indulekha, which was written by Chandu Menon in 1889. It was widely acknowledged as the first novel in Malayalam, and indeed it did fulfill the conventionalities that was demanded by the novel in terms of form and complexity. I would like to quote Dr. G.S. Jayashree, whose article in The Hindu had this to say about the emergence of the novel in the Indian vernacular. I quote, "In the Indian context, we find that the emergence of the novel as a new genre in all the regional languages coincided with the emergence of aesthetic of the modern. It had the explicit purpose of incorporating corresponding societies into the colonial project of modernity. Colonial modernity in its discursive mode was sustained in the vernacular imagination through negotiation, adaptation, and cultural translation. It was in print, totemic to modernity, and materially enshrining its message that this translation found its paradigmatic expression." It is this modern that Parangodi Parinayam critiques through its use of the burlesque. The novel is a delightful deep dive into the anti-modern. I don't mean anti-modern in the meaning of against modern, but rather in the context of the scientific word, anti-matter, which is an opposite of matter, but still matter. The burlesque that Parangodi Parinayam is an expression of the modern from this turn-around point of view. Its writer, K. Ramankuti Menon, makes no bones about the fact either, as he says in his rather engaging preface. I have several reasons for giving the purely native name Parangodi Parinayam for my book, rather than more sophisticated names such as Janagi Parinayam or Rukmini Swayamvaram. If I be remiss enough not to give my readers a prior knowledge of these facts, They would just take it casually and may never come to know of my extreme cleverness in using few words with a wealth of hidden meaning to meet all needs with the greatest ease. In the fear that my intelligence would then go unappreciated, like the lotus that blooms in the midst of a forest, I take the freedom to elaborate on this and humbly request my readers not to presume that I am underestimating their powers of comprehension. When I read Parangodi Parinayam, I realized it is a Tristram Shandy of Malayalam literature. The delightful jumps through various hoops and the ways that high modernity is ridiculed, all the while maintaining the seriousness of tone. Translated into English by Sulojana Ramohan for Samyukta, the Malayalam Parangodi Parinayam sadly had been lost to the sands of time. It went without being recognized for its biting satire, its irony, sense of wit, and linguistic beauty. This attempt by Samyukta is to give the novel its due, to restore, at least in English, the stature that it deserves. When Indulega tells the story of the love affair between the young and beautiful cultured and modern Indulekha and Madhavan, in Parangodi Paranam, the hero is Parangodin Marar, an English-educated lawyer like Madhavan. The heroine is Parangodi Kuti, also schooled in Western ways like Indulega. From their childhood, they had decided to marry each other. The situation gets tense when Parangodi Kuti's relatives decide to marry her to her uncle, Kandappa Menon's son, Pangasha Menon. Pangasha Menon decides to marry Ammukutti, who he feels would more fit into his Taravad. Pangasha Menon tries to convince his mother his reasons for rejecting Parangodi Kuti. In the course of the explanations, he critiques the defects that had crept in when English education, customs, and manners were introduced in the country. After a lot of deliberations and reasoning, the lovers do not enter into marriage immediately, unlike in Indulega, the hero and heroine decide to wait for some more time before getting married, in keeping with the English custom of courting. Here is an excerpt from the novel that will give you an inkling of the textural beauty of this work, that in its technique and wit is comparable to Oscar Wilde. At the time, Pangasha Menon and his mother, as stated in the previous chapter, were sitting together on the window seat adjoining the bedroom talking. Ammalu had been standing behind the door of the bedroom. At first, Ammalu thought their talk was confidential and went to bed. But then she heard the words marriage and the like, and realizing it was not a discussion she couldn't listen to, she padded over to the door and again stood behind it. She was greatly amused by all that her brother had to say of Parangodi Kuti. There was a particular reason for this. On the day of the previous Tiruvonam, she had gone to Parangodi Kutti's house in the afternoon, together with her sister Ammukutti and one or two friends. Mukandi Amma happened to be in the southern drawing room at that time, and so they sat down with her for a while, chewing betel and cracking jokes. Mukandi Amma then asked Ammalu to perform Kaigotikali. All of them were in a joyful mood as it was the Onam festival. Ammalu's dancing and singing pleased the eye and ear of every beholder. She never made unnecessary gestures that spoiled the dance or music. Her voice was as melodious as a nightingale's. For about 2 hours, all of them remained in the room singing as they danced the Kaigotikali. At last, when it was time to leave, they inquired after Parangodi Kuti. Coming to know that she was upstairs in her room, all the girls ran up together excitedly. The door to the room was half closed. No sound came from within. Asking aloud, "Why is there no one inside?" Ammalu entered the room. Parangodi Kuti was then reclining on a couch, reading the newspaper London Times with great interest. She was immersed in the speech Gladstone had made on the issue of the Home Rule. It was this fascinating point that the group trooped in, making a great deal of noise. Turning only her head from where she lay, she gave them a look. She was not very pleased by this intrusion. For one thing, she disliked others coming upstairs without invitation or prior intimation. Hope you enjoyed the excerpt. Here is the cover of the novel as it is being released. And now we have Dr. Anjana Shankar speaking to us about To the Workplace, a work that has a very significant voice in the expressions of Kerala's feminist movement.
Good evening, all. It is indeed a happy occasion today for all of us who have been associated in one way or the other with, with the unraveling and the publication of the first feminist play in Malayalam, Thozhil Kendrathilekke, which was written in 1948 and much later translated into English in 2009. The translation of the work appeared in the January 2009 volume of Samyukta, and it was done by me. Though published more than 7 decades back in 1948, the original Malayalam version of the play was lying forgotten in the dark and dusty corners of Appantampuram Library in Thrissur, from where it was unravelled by Dr. K.R. Beena, an enthusiastic research scholar then. She handed over the copy to her husband, Dr. N.R. Gramaprakash, a Malayalam professor and a renowned scholar who recognized the value and worth of the work. He set about unraveling the history of its staging and writing, and he brought to light the historical significance of the work. What makes the first staging of the play way back in 1948 remarkable is the fact that all the characters, including the male ones in the play, were enacted by Nambudiri women known as Andarjanams. Now, the historical distinction of having created and enacted the all-women play in Malayalam belongs to the Andarjana Samajam, a commune of Malayali Brahmin women formed in 1931. Its primary aim was to reform the Nambudiri community, which, though the highest in caste hierarchy, treated their women in the most deplorable manner. These Andarjanams were denied the freedom to move out of their households known as Mana or Illam, and were always accompanied by a maid and had to hide themselves behind a Kajjan umbrella. Even before the attainment of puberty, they were married off to men old enough to be their fathers or even grandfathers, and were denied a chance to educate themselves. Polygamy was practiced among Nambudiri men, but widow remarriage was unheard of, and this led to a situation where many widowed young girls were left to languish in the dark recesses of the Mana. Now, Gandhiji's slogan that social reformation was as important as political reformation had a deep-seated impact in the Nambudiri community also, and this led to the reformation movement among the Nambudiris, which was spearheaded by V.T. Bhattacharya, M.R.B. and E.M.S. Nambudiripat. Their main aim was to humanize the Nambudiri caste. Now, encouraged by all this, a female collective known as Andarjana Samajam started functioning in Tiruthumal Illam at Lakkadi in Palakkad district. A glorious chapter was started in the annals of the feminist history of Kerala when this homestead, which was donated by a well-wisher CMS Nambudiripat, offered solace to Andarjanams groaning under domestic and caste atrocities, and some of them even facing excommunication. This homestead was formally inaugurated as the seat of Andarjana Samajam in June 1947 by Arya Pallam in the presence of V.T. Bhattacharya and M.R.B. A whole lot of issues related to women were forcefully voiced forth within the Nambudiri reformist circles by the Samajam. These included women's education, dress reforms, monogamy, widow remarriage, intra-caste marriage, and freedom of travel. The Samajam also gave training to the Andarjanams who had broken away from their orthodox families in various jobs like weaving, spinning, and learning Hindi, which would equip them to earn a livelihood. This was seen as the best means to resist attempts to sell poor Andarjanams forcibly in marriage in Siddhipur and Sirsi in Karnataka, which was a common evil practice prevalent in the among many Nambudiris in those times. Kavungara Bhargavi, a 13-year-old girl who resisted such an attempt by her family, was tortured by her uncle as her father was dead, and the Samajam took it upon themselves to save her. They rescued and brought her to the workplace, and it was her experience that inspired the play Tozhil Kendrathilekku. Ironically enough, it was the prototype Kavungal Bhargavi herself who played the role of Devasena, the character rescued from her unhappy domestic situation by two Andarjana Samajam workers, namely Parvati and Devaki. Devaki's husband, an advocate by profession, is a very oppressive and selfish patriarchal male. Inspired by the ideas instilled in her by the Andarjana Samajam, Devaki revolts against her marital prison, and this angers her husband, who calls her a mad woman and the workplace a whorehouse. Now, she breaks her husband's punul on hearing or sacred thread that symbolizes his Brahminical hegemony and walks out on him. This single act highlights her as a far stronger character than Ibsen's Nora, who also similarly walked out on her husband 7 decades back. Thus, the play translated as To the Workplace and published in January 2009 volume of Samyukta occupies a unique place in the history of Malayalam drama as the first play to evolve totally out of women's initiative, just like the journal Samyukta itself, in which the play appeared in translation, which has the tag Women's Initiative. And Samyukta is the brainchild and product of the blood and sweat of a fantastic team of women led by Dr. G.S. Jayasri, who supported and encouraged me to complete the translation and was kind enough to publish it in the book form. I also place on record my heartfelt gratitude to my close friend and translator Dr. Radhika P. Menon, who painstakingly went through my draft and gave very valuable suggestions. The actual translation offered many challenges with regard to finding cultural equivalence for Malayalam words like Tali, Brahmasam and Gobi, and also religious observances like Kavadi, Vishu, Tapasya, etc. Such problems were solved by retaining the original Malayalam word and providing a glossary at the end of the translation. A couple of songs which had to be translated also raised certain issues, but the greatest difficulty encountered by me was to retain the tempo of the language of the play, typical of the time of its composition 8 decades back, and to recapture in English the unique vocabulary and the speech rhythm of the Nambudiri community while translating. Now, looking back, I feel a sense of fulfillment as it makes a small attempt to place before the world the odds against which my grandmother's generation had to fight or yield in order to enable our generation enjoy the freedom which we now take for granted.
These texts are our ways of reclaiming our histories, as Mini Krishnan pointed out on this channel the other day. Here is the cover to the workplace. These books will be shortly available on the website of Samyukta India Press, and we hope that you are suitably impressed and inspired to visit us again to purchase the same. Thank you for staying with us. See you tomorrow.